says we are live. It now has the loading bar going across the screen. It is showing the video on here. It is now giving me a timestamp. We are live.
All right, how's it going? How is it going? Welcome. Welcome to the Outpost 1018 May 2020 podcast, where we're talking about the big one, the important one, the one that everyone knows and loves, except for people who got into anime in the last 5 years. But the big one. All right, this is the anime that defines anime. This is the anime that transcends anime, and even people who hate anime love this anime. And I am of course talking about Cowboy Bebop.
3,
Uh,
2, 1, let's jam.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Everyone, introduce yourselves. I'm of course Neo Tokyo Tempo.
I am Getsuryu or Josh.
Then I'm a striker red.
I'm RJ. I go by Red Baron.
All right, sweet. So, Cowboy Bebop. This is a bit of a daunting task, but I think we can do it. So, Cowboy Bebop was, of course, released in Japan in 1998, 1997, something like that. Or was it 99? Look that up.
1997.
All right, 1997. And was very quickly canceled, the end. But then it came back. And it came back with a vengeance. And ended up being one of the most critically acclaimed anime of all time. And then it came to America and aired on Adult Swim, and it was dubbed in English. And you might be thinking, "Oh, that's terrible. Why would you do that? Stupid TV people. I hate English dubs." And then you watch the English dub, and it's like, wow, this is actually good.
I believe it was the director. She was very. No. The American voice director. I forgot who she is. There's a couple videos on her. So she had experience in actual television. So when she came across the cast, she directed it just perfectly. As in, it sounds organic. It sounds like the characters are actually like they know each other or they're interacting with each other in a natural way. It doesn't sound wooden or forced. That's the most important part.
And anyway, Cowboy Bebop stars Spike Spiegel, Faye Valentine, and Jet Black, and they are bounty hunters, going around the semi-post-apocalyptic solar system, sorry. And collecting bounty heads because the police forces in the solar system, after the Earth was destroyed by the hyperspace gate accident, or not destroyed, but made pretty irrelevant after the hyperspace gate accident due to constant meteors hitting the planet. The police forces just don't have the manpower or the resources to police the solar system. So criminals run rampant, and thus they have bounty hunters to bring in the suspects. The bounty head must be brought in alive, or else there's no reward. There are no dead or alive bounties. And that's where these.
Well, it depends though. That some of them are dead, some of them are dead, some of them are alive, or both.
Well, no, the ones that are dead, they don't get paid for those.
Oh, they don't? I thought
No.
some of them were wanted dead or alive. And never mind, I fucked up that detail.
Yep.
And they are completely reckless, and they always bite off more than they can chew, and they always go after the biggest bounties out there, and end up paying the price for it. And they're always drifting through space, broke.
They always end up broke by the end of the episode, or the end of another episode, or the beginning of another episode.
Yeah,
or
basically.
in the middle of the episode whenever they gamble everything.
Yes.
Are you guys looking for the series casting directors? Leah Sargent.
Well,
who,
we can get into that a bit later.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's jump right into this, because I think most people have a good idea of what Cowboy Bebop is. Most people have seen it, and if you haven't, what are you doing? Like, what are you actually doing? Go watch it.
Well, that was
Anyway.
me until about, I don't know, about 45
the
minutes ago, so.
The voice director was none other than Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, who also played Julia in the series.
Okay. All
right. So, what did you guys think of the animation? We're starting small. We're starting with animation.
I guess I can start this off. I'm gonna say we have to remember whenever this was animated. This is the late 90s. And for its time period, this is actually one of the most beautiful animes. Visually, it's very eye-catching. It's very unique. The characters pop from the background most of the time. There's sometimes whenever you can see that they're settling in, mostly whenever you're talking about Spike and Jet. But whenever it comes to like Faye, Ed, and Ein, you can see the characters popping out of the background more. A lot of the fights, you can see it popping more, and a lot of the fight scenes are very well animated as well.
There's a very high contrast with all the colors, which is very common for the time. And anime has unfortunately gone away from that, and a lot of shows nowadays kind of look washed out. Whereas shows from this period of time, they have a very rich color scheme, and there is, of course, also something to be said about hand painted animation and its imperfections actually adding to the character and the beauty of the art itself. Though that is something that is more debatable than something that is like directly objectively provable.
Yeah,
But what I can say is the character designs are very well done. You can recognize who they are just by their silhouettes. In fact, they use their silhouettes all the time in the opening, and the designs of the environments, they differ from planet to planet, ship to ship, and it all looks everything looks like it's supposed to be there, while at the same time being unique for what it is. And yeah. What were you going to say, Getsudu?
I was gonna say it's more of a labor of love at that time period too. Like with the animation styles now, much of it is, CG. So it is very much more basic where you're able to do complex things with the styles, and it's a lot faster and you're able to put out more. However, whenever it's drawn like this, you can see more of the details, and it really adds to it. Uh, while you can also see that it is a lot older at the same time. So I wanted to just say that it is definitely more of a labor of love, and if someone were to do it now, we would be able to have this debate, but it is still extremely expensive. So.
Yes.
Could you repeat what's expensive? I missed this. What's expensive again?
Hand painting.
cell shading, basically.
Yes, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. It's cheaper to just use CG these days.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of anime and gaming studios are trying to push for that because it's cheaper to just hire someone and mocap them for like God knows how many hours. But that's still cheaper than paying an animator to draw frame by frames of a scene.
Yeah, so it's more you can tell the labor of love that goes into a lot of these animes at this time.
All right.
And it actually made each anime more important because you could tell like it's like this is going to cost a lot of money to make, so they had to all be good hits.
Well, this is coming from an era that, well, let's just say that cell shading was on its way out.
Yep.
But the unfortunate thing about cell shading is that, considering the cost of the cells themselves and the time it takes to actually put every single detail on said cell, like you can find a bit behind the scenes video of when they made Akira. It was made entirely on cell shading, and they were using brushes, and that's something that CGI will never be able to how should I say this? It will never be able to emulate that human touch, which was what Cowboy Bebop was, because it was cell shaded. It was done in cell shading.
Yeah.
So
there is some CGI in Cowboy Bebop.
Mhm.
Most notably the hyperspace gates, and they are of course the visuals that have aged the poorest out of all of it, especially since because they've already been rendered. They can't just be upscaled like the film can be.
Yeah, and
They'd have to re-render it. They'd have to re-render it from scratch.
Yeah.
Which they probably don't have the original files to do so.
Yeah, and then redoing everything again. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But that's more of the debate of like it's like why does it feel so good? Like it is timeless partly because of how well done it is.
This anime has. I'm gonna go full Jeremy Clarkson here and say that this anime has a soul. It has like a soul. It speaks to you. It's
organic. It's organic. It's
exactly.
an extremely organic story.
Now, this is of course an action show, so let's talk about the fight scenes a little bit.
Oh yeah. Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay, so I have a list of my favorite episodes, and I'm going to read them off. But my favorite episode, this is really important, but my favorite episode has a very, very particular similarity to the first episode. And the first episode is arguably what defines the fighting in throughout the show. So, my favorite episodes, if I had to pick three, top three would be Bohemian Rhapsody, Wild Horses, Black Dog Serenade, and then the second, the other one I couldn't decide would be Boogie Woogie Feng Shui, Honky Tonk Women, Mushroom Samba. But my favorite out of all of them would have to be Waltz for Venus. I don't know how to say it. Is it Waltz? I don't know how to say the word.
It's just Waltz.
Yeah, Waltz for Venus, because that story.
Waltz.
Yeah, Waltz. Waltz for Venus. It's incredibly sad, but at the same time, it's pretty well written. Because growing up, I watched a lot of like noir police shows, especially because I lived overseas. And Cowboy Bebop is incredibly similar to those shows. I'm talking like Italian police thrillers. Like, by the way, those also used lots of jazz and running through streets because it's cheaper to record people running through streets with guns chasing each other than it is to do like a multi-million-dollar action sets. We're talking like TV shows from like the 70s, 80s, etc.
Yeah.
So, what I really liked about Waltz for Venus is when Spike comes across the can we do spoilers? I mean, it's pretty sure it's enough.
Yeah.
So he does something which you would say, oh, it's out of character, except it's not, because this man's got a heart. Like, he's not just a bounty hunter. He actually, like, he looks at situations differently if he can. And when he finds out that one of their targets is the young man he came across, he actually sympathizes with him. He actually helps him hide the is it the Venus plant? I forgot what it's called. Gray ash. That's what it's called. Gray ash. So the mob boss Picaro, and I love that his goons are called Huey, Louie, and Dewey, like the three ducklings from DuckTales. Anyways, what's important is this: he meets Rocco, and Rocco's sister is, I believe, she's going blind due to Venus sickness.
Yeah, and she Stella.
Yeah, Rocco's sister Stella is going blind from Venus sickness, and the only thing that can cure her is this plant, the gray ash. And here's why Rocco's mob boss Picaro and the three goons are wanted. Those things are extremely rare and extremely expensive, and they stole it from somewhere. But Rocco took the opportunity to steal it for his sister. So it's like the authorities are after him. There's bounty hunters that are probably going to come after him eventually, and his old crew is after him. And Spike helps him out. But how does it relate to the first episode? Well, the first episode goes a little differently. The first episode, it's a mob boss and his girlfriend on the run with a supply of this drug called Blood Eye, which basically makes you go berserk. And Spike doesn't exactly help them. he finds an excuse to start fist fighting the guy. And my point is this: in the first episode, Spike, when he's fighting, I believe the guy's name Asimov. Yeah, he's fighting Asimov, and he's doing Jeet Kune Do. He's straight up doing like Bruce Lee style kung fu, and the visuals for that are fluid. Like, if you had to watch it, it's like you're watching a human being almost. Like, it feels more like an animated movie than a TV show episode or an anime episode. And the way I relate that to Vaults for Venus, because I think that's a more refined example of Spike's personality. Like, if I have to compare these two episodes, in that one you see gunplay, you see Spike, running around fighting people. But you also see the Jeet Kune Do again. And again, it's very fluid. So the animation for the body movement and also the space battles. I love the space battles. I'm a huge fan of Ace Combat. It reminded me of Ace Combat.
I like how Jet's Starfighter is designed, the Swordfish 2. It has headlights, almost like an American muscle car. It's sort of designed kind of to look like that.
Oh yeah, you find out in Serenade, the guy who made that is actually American too.
The funny thing is the entirety of the cabin kind of looks like an old Zagato styled Italian sports car. Or something like an Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale.
Yeah. The ships in general are quite well done. I quite like how the Bebop is designed. The Bebop, what they're doing with it is not what it's intended to be used for. It's actually an old fishing vessel, which is why it lands on the water. But but allow me to sort of make comparisons of with other sci-fi anime, and note that in shows like Star Trek, and or did I say sci-fi anime? Just sci-fi in general. Sorry. Shows like Star Trek, and various other sci-fi, everything looks kind of sterile. Everything looks like it was made in a sterile room in NASA, which is fine. But what I like about the Bebop is that it looks lived in. It looks like a big heavy duty mechanical
It looks like a beat up house.
It looks like a big heavy duty mechanical vehicle that was built in a factory or a garage or something, and you work on it with wrenches and soldering irons, and if it's not cooperating, you hit it with a hammer, and it's kind of grungy looking. It's got scratches, scuffs, scrapes everywhere.
I think
it looks like the inside of a house that's been not very well taken care of by the roommates living inside.
Yeah. I think a good example, like just a line from the show, was whenever he was kicking the beta tape. The beta player, and and like he's like, hitting something isn't always gonna fix it. He's like, it makes my ship work better though. It's like that's the mentality of how they treat their ship. It's just like if I kick it, it'll work.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best way to describe it.
It really sells the idea that that there's been 4 people smoking cigarettes in there for a couple years.
Few years.
So are we assuming that the Bebop is basically a floating crack house in space?
I wouldn't say crack house, but definitely it's definitely a working class man's ship.
It looks like a beat up apartment.
It looks like it smells like a bar.
Can we also talk about Faye's ship while we're at it?
It's also beat up.
It looks like one of those helicopters from Vietnam with the weird bubble cockpit.
Huey's. Yeah, I can see that.
If that's a Huey helicopter?
Huey doesn't have a bubble compartment. I think you're thinking
Bell
of the
47.
ones. Yeah. You're thinking the ones they used in Korea. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, her cockpit looks like that, exactly like that. If you want to look at chat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a big bubble thing. Yeah.
To be honest, the battle scratches in the Bebop and the other ships, to me that shows character. That just shows how what they gone through.
Yeah.
You know, to get all that bread, all those wulongs. You know, it's they're battle marks more than anything else. They're badges of honor.
Yeah, and I'd also like to really I mentioned it in passing, but I'd like to talk about the many different environments that they go to that are quite varied, quite distinct, and yet feel very real from one another. Like Ganymede feels quite different from Venus. Venus feels quite different from Mars. Mars feels different from Earth, and so on and so on. And they all have and not only do they look different, but they also have their own cultures, and you can see that reflected in their design. A lot of the asteroids have either like a Hispanic theme or a Far Eastern theme,
or a Russian theme in the case of Jupiter. It's like a combination of Moscow and Detroit.
Are you referring to Ganymede?
Yeah, I mean where the episodes.
No, he's talking. No. That's not Ganymede, is it? He's talking about Jupiter Blues.
Jupiter Jazz.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jupiter Jazz. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's definitely interesting that they're able to travel like that and then have that, because they also touch on the fact that kind of like Earth is this like very desolate area now where
Only
like
crazy people live there.
only crazy people live there. So it's kind of like each country just kind of moved to a different
Planet.
planet that kind of like represents close to where they live to begin with. So like with the more Hispanic theme, you did get like the desert. The only weird one to me was like I think it was in episode 8 where like the one with the mushrooms. Like
Yeah,
yeah,
I was about to say
everyone
Mushroom Samba.
everyone was
Yeah,
like ghetto and they were living in the middle of the desert, and that was like a little off. But that was
yeah.
the only weird one to me.
It actually was a mixture between the Midwest, a little bit of Arizona, and then you missed the fact that it's also part of the Wild Wild West.
It looked like a mix of Wild Wild West and blaxploitation. Like straight up, the female character you see, she looks like there's I forgot what movie it was. There's a blaxploitation film where there's a similar looking character, but the dude. Hold on, dude. I'm trying to say this. So there's a scene where they're all after the dealer. I believe like he killed one of the relatives of one of the black characters chasing after him. And the dude, he reminds me of friggin' like Black Dynamite, but he's got like smoother looking clothes, and it's like a splice between Western and blaxploitation, and it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's just kind of
Are you
it was
looking
kind
for
of
Foxy
weird.
Brown though? Are you looking for Foxy Brown though?
Yeah, that's the female character. That's the name, Foxy Brown. She almost looks like Foxy Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing a reference about it, and I feel like the Domino was actually modeled after Pam Grier when in that movie. She does look.
All right. Let's move on to the audio side of things, just because I know this is going to take just as long.
Okay.
Lord.
Um,
It's gonna be-
so the audio is my favorite part. I'm going to 100% say I did not enjoy the first about 8 episodes, or I'd say 7. Episode 8 was good.
Burn the
It
heretic!
was it was hard for me to get into, but every single time you load this anime and that fucking theme song plays, it just gets you so hyped to like it's like, all right, well, at least I get this part, at least I get this, and like the ending theme, like just having that smooth jazz right at the end too, it's
Yeah.
a perfect way to end an episode, and it like they have the perfect way to start an episode, because every
Yeah.
episode you get hyped to see it, and then you get that cool down at the end.
Yeah.
And then all the songs throughout the entire series, the different rock ballads, the different like jazz parts, like all the music throughout it, just it's some of the best music. Debatably the best soundtrack whenever it comes to any anime, I would argue. Maybe like if you like lo-fi, you're gonna say Samurai Champloo, but for the most part, this is one of the top ones. I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 that would compete with it on a musical level.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lewis.
From the standpoint of meme culture, a lot of people are gonna be familiar with the songs in the anime itself, because they've been using so many channels, so many videos on YouTube, that it's hard not to recognize a lot of the songs were from Cowboy Bebop. Like YouTuber Michael Reeves, he uses the Cowboy Bebop soundtrack for his videos. The interesting thing is the band itself. The band who made all the jazz music is called Seatbelts. It's actually Yoko Kanno's band, and it was only done for the single purpose of this anime. That was it. But when the entire series wrapped up, they broke up. That is the saddest part, though. The fact that Yoko Kanno managed.
Are you talking about the seatbelts?
Yeah.
Yes.
They came back together, but due to the coronavirus, they held a. I believe I'll actually post the news article. They got back together for a Cowboy Bebop theme virtual performance.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I can also say that Yoko Kanno, when it comes to music, she is a woman of culture.
Yeah.
And there is not a single. Well,
it's very hard to find someone as talented as her. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and I mean, just even looking at like the other works, like one of the animes that I said that would compete with it, like two of them are on this list, which is Darker Than Black and Ghost in the Shell. Both of those easily stand alone. And looking at the other ones, like it's ones that I didn't really watch, so I wouldn't be able to know. So it's like Turn a Gundam, Wolf's Rain is on this, Kid Slope, and Terror in Resort. Yeah, so I mean, like she's just done so much that you can tell that it's like her name's on a soundtrack, you know it's good. There you go.
Yeah. Now one of the things we often run into in this podcast over and over again is the soundtrack is generic. We don't remember any of the songs. I can't think of what any of the music that actually plays during the show sounds like. After the first time I watched this, and mind you, I've watched this like 4 or 5 times. After the first time I watched it, not only was all the music stuck in my head, and not only could I like think of what the music sounded like and actually accurately like remember it, but I was also rushing to not only listen to the opening theme, but also all the other songs in the soundtrack. It can be kind of hard to qualify what is meant by generic, and it can be, but I think this, comparing something to this might be a good way to at least get an idea, because this is the exact opposite of generic. So anything that's the opposite of this probably isn't too good.
Yeah. I kind of also want to touch on like while we're talking about the music, like we'll definitely get into a lot of the sound effects because I thought a lot of the sound effects were also really good. But just to touch on this is a 26 episode anime. There is 7 soundtracks for this, including the movie soundtracks. There is 4 additional soundtracks on top of that were remastered, and then put out with like box sets and different ideas around it. So you have 11 different soundtracks revolving around 26 episodes in a movie. You cannot emphasize how important music is more than that. Where if you have that much music in that many episodes, it's obviously a driving factor.
I want to drive this home, but Shinichiro Watanabe is a total musicphile. And you can tell by all the anime he's ever done. Space Dandy, Carolyn Tuesday, I already mentioned Space Dandy, Shamala Champloo, and so on and so on. A lot of his work focuses around music, and that's because it actually reflects on the director's love for music as a whole.
Yeah. So let's kind of shift gears to the sound effects. I'm going to start with something that happens in the first episode where the Asimov Sorensen who is the villain in the first episode, is trying to escape with a load of drugs. Trying to escape the asteroid Tijuana with a load of drugs, and there's no way he's going to make it, and he is hopped up on these drugs like nobody's business.
You mean
And
red eye?
yeah. And well, the drugs are just a MacGuffin. It doesn't really matter. The
the blood eye.
Yeah, and anyway, there's a giant police blockade. It's obvious he's not going to make it. So his girlfriend, who is riding in the spaceship with him, the stolen spaceship, says, "We'll never get out of here. We'll never get to Mars." And then you hear, and everything stops. All sound in the anime stops about a quarter of a second beforehand to emphasize this gunshot sound. And you see that she's killed Asimov Sorensen, and it really gives you a jolt.
Oh, when Katarina starts firing at the guy because
not starts firing. There's one shot.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
And then the inevitable happens with the ship.
Yeah. Their ship is kind of blown apart.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, regarding sound effects, the jet sounds when it comes to the starships themselves are actually. It looked like they dedicated a lot of time into trying to replicate the noises from the turbines.
Yeah.
So, I appreciate that, considering that I got much to say, to be honest.
I find all the sound effects to be very to definitely be taken after 50s through 80s movies. There's whenever somebody hits punches someone else, there's that classic sound effect, that classic sound effect that they make by like hitting a side of beef with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of those sound effects. Like the sound of like all the breaking glass is really well done. The gunshots during a lot of the fights are really well done.
And the gunshots sound like they could be pulled straight out of Dirty Harry or like some other Clint Eastwood movie.
Yeah, and a lot of the sounds sound accurate, even if like it's not the best accuracy to it. Where like you get it. One of the things that I want to touch on too, and this kind of I want to emphasize like how good this is. Just on a sound balancing level, like whenever something's coming in, it sounds visually correct. So, like whenever it's like a ship landing, where you get the sound of it coming on screen, and then it gets louder, and then it goes down as like the engines slowly turn off.
They make very good use of stereo panning as well.
Yeah. They did an extremely good job at doing all the audio quality things. Just like everything was well done, and I think we can talk about the voice acting too, because both the Japanese and the
I
English
first just wanted
good.
to mention, just to build off of the sounds and the use of stereo panning and stuff. There's a scene before we get into the voice acting. Mm-hmm. There's a scene in the episode where you're revealing Faye's backstory, My Funny Valentine, and she wakes up from a coma, and she's being told it's the future, and she starts getting woozy, and you see a POV shot from her perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And as the guy is talking to her, you hear the guy who's in that scene. I forget his name. You hear his voice pan around from the left to the right speakers and back again as her head is sort of rocking back and forth, and because of how dizzy she is. And it really sells to you and makes you emphasize or empathize with how she's feeling at the moment, just how sick she feels. But anyway,
all things considered, I would agree with you, because of the fact that Faye has been cryogenically frozen, and waking up from that is usually a very confusing thing. It's a very good reference when it comes to movies. There is some things I want to add before we start on the voice acting, and it's the comical aspect of the sounds as well. Because, like for example, in the Big Shot TV show Inside the Anime, the one with Punch and Judy.
Yeah, the cowboy one. Yeah.
When the bullshit sound of the cartoon gun starts firing. Yeah, I felt
like, hey there, cowboys! Today's targets are, and then they announce the bounties.
Yeah, there's a pretty good edit in the second episode where they start out the episode with the big shot segment, and then as the chase scene at the end of the episode ends and they're about to crash into the police station, it hard cuts into that where exactly where the explosion would have been. And it's quite a good edit. But anyway, let's get back on track and move into the voice acting now.
I want to start with regarding the voice acting part. Having watched both the Japanese and the English dub of the Cowboy Bebop, I can honestly say that Cowboy Bebop is quite possibly, in fact, it is one of the very rare instances where the English dub is actually better than the Japanese dub, and that's despite the fact that the voice actors are on very high caliber. You have Jet's voice actor in the Japanese dub, who is Unsho Ishizuka. You got Megumi Hayoshibara, who played Faye Valentine. She's also there's also Aoi Tada, who he's actually a singer more than anything else. And then, well, in the English version, you have Wendy Lee as Faye Valentine, Bob Benningsley. You have all these. You have these Melissa Fun playing as Faye, and then you have Stephen J. Bloom himself as Spike Spiegel. Let me get the name of the Japanese voice actor for Spike real quick.
But anyway, yeah, the voice actors in the English dub, most of them sound very natural. It's obvious that the main cast is very good, but a lot of the side characters sound quite natural too. Like the lady in the lady who's the girlfriend of Asimov Sorensen in the first episode sounds, she sounds she's
because
yeah, she's got the Mexican accent, and it's actually extremely well done. It sounds like she's genuine.
Yes, they did in fact hire a Latina woman to play as Katarina. Okay, Koichi Yamadera. That's the main voice actor in the Japanese stuff for Spike Spiegel. He also voices Ain as a bonus. Like all the dot noises, that's done by Koichi himself.
Did they redo the dog noises for
No.
the?
Nope, they're all the same Japanese ones.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Man, he could bark very convincingly.
Oh yeah, no, he's one of the best. So and one thing that I want to touch on, because we hold these people in such a highlight, right? Like we want to say it's like, oh wow, like look at all of their amazing animes they were in, and then like we start listing them. Um, this was a lot of their biggest first ones. Like a bunch of them had like minor roles throughout it. This was the standout for most of them in the English dub. If you look at the guy who played Spike, he played in Bastard, and then like a few others that are very under the like kind of under the ground.
I recall this was Stephen J. Bloom's breakout role.
Yeah, and then you look at the guy who played Jet. He played a couple roles in Digimon at the same time, and then
he played in Outlaw Star.
Yeah, he was the narrator in Outlaw Star, which that
Yep.
was. But he also did a couple minor roles in normal television too. But all of those were very minor roles. And then
he was also one of the boss characters. Rather, well, it's an adaptation of a video game. Gungrave. He was one of the major characters in Gungrave who ends up fighting the main character.
Yeah, I'd say, and then you have Wendy, who has like pretty much the biggest resume out of all of them, and then Melissa has almost nothing, and then like now she's very well known. She was in Wicked on Broadway, so it's like you have these very young voice actors who were starting to get into the game, and they did such an amazing job. And I really wanted to emphasize that this was before they really started getting known that this was happening. So they found a bunch of very good young talent before they were going to become the stars they are today.
Yeah, this show pretty much made them all famous. And in the case of Melissa Fun, and what's interesting is that I know RJ mentioned Rocco and Stella, but it ends up that her siblings also played the characters in the English dub.
All right, so we are in grave danger of going overtime. In fact, we are definitely going to go overtime.
We kind of expected to go overtime.
Let's say
one thing, visually before we move on. I like the attention to detail. So Spike's pistol is a Jericho. That's a real life pistol, and I don't want to call it gun porn, but it's like I was mentioning before the animation in Vaults for Venus and the very first episode, the fighting animation was great, but the guns are for the most part accurate, aside from the insane amount of rounds being used in the fight scenes. I like the attention to detail, especially the fact that it's a real life pistol that he's carrying.
I think with gunfights in movies, generally it's intended to be assumed that they reloaded off screen.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know. No, I was saying like I was joking around about that. No, but what I'm saying is I like the attention to detail with the weaponry, especially when the Katarina. Yeah, when Katarina is aiming to shoot Spike when Spike is fighting Asimov, when she's looking down the iron sight of her pistol, that scene alone is how I argue that this show.
I like.
This show should be considered an animated film instead of anime.
Yeah,
but
I like how the gun like shakes, like you can tell she's scared.
Yeah.
But anyway,
there's also
in the interest of time, and also because it's also because the story and the characters in the show are kind of one and the same. I think we should just bundle story and characters up into one segment because we're undoubtedly going to just grovel all or spill all of the story out while we're talking about the characters anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I probably have the least, or probably the lowest score out of everyone else, that I'm assuming. So I guess maybe I can start and then you guys build off what I say.
Okay.
I think that that's the best way, and then you guys can team up and say that I'm wrong. Um,
You're
so
gonna burn, bro. You're gonna
so
burn.
I found a lot of like I enjoyed the characters more than the plot, even though it was very character driven. You had Spike being very like 1 to 2 dimensional, where he has his like I don't care moments, like I don't care about anyone else, I just care about myself. And then like my ship and like a couple people around me, and then he's like I hate all of these people, I hate all this, and just very non-caring. But then he has acts of caring throughout it, like that he shows like some emotion, but he tries to shrug it off. You have Jet, who is trying to like piece things together. You can tell that he's a past cop. You can tell that he's more organized. You have Faye, who is like trying to shrug off the fact that her past is really fucked up, and she doesn't really know who she is, and just dealing with that trauma. And then you have Ed being Ed, and honestly, Ed is my favorite character. So
I know that it's I know that Ed's plot was basically she was trying to look for her father, who one day she got lost, and then her father just forgot about her.
Yeah, and
because the man is as eccentric as she is.
Her father, who is an actual insane geologist, every time an asteroid lands on Earth, he immediately goes to make a map about the surrounding area, even though it's a futile effort because asteroids just keep hitting Earth because the atmosphere is screwed up.
Yeah, no, and I found like his character ridiculous, and like that ending, like that conclusion just being dumb. Like
Yeah.
it was just like, oh, like oh, Ed father gone. It's like, really? That's it? Like no sadness, no character growth from Ed. Ed's just like, oh well, let's go back to doing what we were doing. It's like, okay, but that doesn't explain Ed that well. Like, we understand why Ed is like that and that her father is like that, but we got very little character development, and like we just got a little bit of background. It was kind of like a dry episode, even though like Ed is one of my favorite characters, being so crazy and out there.
If there's something I like about Francois, that is her real name, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that she is the most eccentric character out of all the people in the Bebop, especially when it comes to the fact that she is also an incredibly talented hacker and a techno wizard. Like she will literally make a computer out of the shittiest materials ever, and it will run as fast as a supercomputer. It's batshit insane.
Yeah.
She will look out anybody.
Yeah, it's an amazing hacker, and like I guess one of the better moments is like whenever you had the chess episode, and Ed was just like trying to beat this person in chess. Like it was like, oh, I don't even care about the mission. Just like I'm going to win this chess match. And then it took like what 4 or 5 days or something for them to conclude the chess match. And then it's like, oh, Ed loses, no, and then it was over. But it's just like that character is so well done, and I wanted more, and I didn't get it, and it kind of felt unfulfilled.
I think if there was, I think there was just about enough Ed. Like Ed remains that entertaining due to her scarcity. Like I feel like if there was more of her, she would start to get annoying.
See, I like the annoying. I wish there was just a little, like, I just wanted a little bit better backstory, I guess.
Josh, I don't want Ed to be anime Jar Jar, okay?
Yeah.
We already have Jar Jar Binks.
I just wanted, like, a better understanding of, like, Ed's history, you know? Like, not just like, oh, her father's also insane.
Neglected,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, and, like, how did... Yeah, like how did
neglected
she
child? Oh, go ahead. You go.
Yeah, and then it's like, how did she become this amazing hacker? Like, I wanted just a little, like, just like a bite more. That's it. Like, just enough, and
Yeah.
it felt so dry. And then with Jet, you get kind of the same thing, where Jet's also one of my favorite characters, and then his
Jet
backstory
is
is very early in, and it's like, oh,
It's
like,
depressing as hell.
yeah, it's depressing, and then it's like, oh, this is your backstory. Well, this sucks, and then like there was like no character build after that. Like you didn't get anything new from Jet the rest of the series.
I think something to note about this show is that all four characters in this show, or all four of the main characters, they're I think a particularly important point to note uh, uh, regarding their development as people is that the point of these characters is that they're stunted by the past that they've run away from and hid from. And they hold on. They actually they don't really go through character development within the show. Because first of all, they've already gone through their character development, and now they're just drifting through their lives as uh, uh, as stagnant entities. And second of all, the point of the show is don't be trapped by your past, and face your past. Don't run away from it. And that's why these characters aren't really going through development, is because they don't really face their past. They just kind of drift through space, pretending in La La Land, pretending like it doesn't exist.
See, like I kind of agree with you until Faye. Because Faye, by the end of it, you can see a slight amount of character development. You can see that she started to face her past, and you can see, like, even whenever she confronts Spike, where it's like, "Hey, don't let your past get behind, like, get you. You're the one that told me that." And like then Spike goes off on that tangent about like how like he's more of just like a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. You can see that Faye went from like fuck this, I don't care, to being like, okay, face your past, but get past it, you know.
Yeah.
So like that, she was the one that actually had character development, and I feel like you should have been able to see a little bit more of that out of Jet, because he did confront his ex. He did confront that she ran from him, and then he did throw away the watch, and he went, okay, well that past is, that's behind me, and like while he still had a bunch of the police stuff that still you could tell weighed on him. Um, there's a difference between moving
the
on.
connections he made.
Yeah. You could see that like there's a difference between it weighing on you still and being able to go, well, that was my past, and moving on from it. And I wish that we would have seen a little bit more of that from Jet, of just being like, okay, well, I accept that this is what happened, and I accept that this is my life now because this woman did this, and it's now over, and she's now gone, and uh, I got my closure from it in a way, and I wish there was more of that.
The thing I respect more about the thing I actually respect about Jet is the fact that the man is pretty much the voice of reason regarding the crew. Considering that Faye is a gambling addict and she's pretty vicious, that all she cares about is money. In the case that Spike's mission was basically to look for his girlfriend. The guy just wanted to get away from the crime life, but
The
unfortunately,
police life.
Yeah. Yes.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about Spike. I'm talking about Spike Spiegel
okay.
regarding his tie-ins with the mob.
Yeah.
And the fact that he and Julia start talking about how they want to get away from it all. They want to have a peaceful life together.
If I may interject now, so if you guys have, I'm sure you know who Charles Dickens is. You know, the author of various books, including Christmas Carol and stuff. In Great Expectations, there's a character named Miss Havisham. So she was more or less what's the word I'm looking for? It's like when you go on a date and the person doesn't show up. You stood up. She was stood up at the altar. On the day of her wedding, the person her husband to be basically didn't show up, and since that day she's gone insane. She refuses to accept that the person she loved betrayed her. She wears her wedding dress throughout her life. She doesn't go outside. In fact, she's in her 30s, and Charles Dickens, as he wrote it, is she's in her 30s at the beginning of the book, but she looks like she's 80 because she's stayed indoors so much that the lack of sunlight has made her body sick. And as a result, it's aging faster. So why would I compare them to Miss Havisham? Well, I think the only character I can't really fully say that is Jet. He gets his closure, you know, about is it Elisa or Alyssa, his fiance / girlfriend that like left him. He had to save she had to save her boyfriend from getting in trouble because he pissed off some loan sharks, and he even helps them out with legal stuff. Says, well, yeah, you were forced into a situation. You're not, you know, you're not really guilty. So he even helps them out. So Jet's the only person I can think of who's not completely like that. He's not completely stuck in time. He's wondering why he was betrayed by everyone he loved. He didn't know who it was that night that sold him out when he was about to make a big huge arrest. And he finds out it was his former partner, and he ends up killing the guy. I think, right? Because the guy tries to kill.
Yeah.
So the guy tricks. I think the guy tricks him into killing him.
Yeah, because he felt guilty about it. Because he basically destroyed Jet's life. Sorry, let me finish what I'm saying. But with Faye, I can't really blame her. Like one of you mentioned, like she's got a Rumpelstiltskin effect. Everyone she knows is gone. She had one friend who's alive. When she goes, I think Ganymede to visit her, it's an old woman. It's like Faye, I remember.
Huh? It was Earth.
Yeah.
Oh, she went to Earth to find it. Okay, I can't. I'm sorry, I mixed up the two because they're visually similar. Yeah. So when she went to Earth, I guess that's also like how it led to finding Ed's dad. I guess I don't know.
There's also the arc between Faye and Whitney Matsumoto, the guy who she ends up falling in love with.
Let RJ finish.
Oh, thanks. So yeah, so Faye, I can't really blame her because the only person she knows is basically like 90 years old almost. Like, and she remembers is like, I remember you, kind of. But with Ed, I don't really think Ed's stuck in the past. Ed is just, dare I say, spazzing out. My favorite thing with Ed was the episode where they met Ed, where Ed hacked a laser satellite just to carve Ed was here on the surface of the planet.
No, Ed didn't hack the satellite.
Oh, the satellite became sentient?
Yes, that's what happened. The satellite was sentient and it was really bored, so that's why it carved those lasers into the ground.
That's even better.
Yeah. I thought that was Ed's doing. Geez, that's even like he said, it's even better. That was a really interesting fight. I watched it, but I kind of that detail got mixed up. But that fight, I really enjoy the space fights, like I mentioned. Anyways, aside from the space fights being great and animated and all, back to what we're talking about. So I think honestly, the only character that is stuck, like voluntarily stuck in the past, is Spike. In fact, I mean, Faye, she moved on. She realized, like she can't change her situation as much as she wants to. She can't change it.
Or the fact that she inherits Whitney's debt. Like, fucking hell, dude. Of all the things you inherit,
Yeah, I know the guy she married, and then Or anyways, my point is, Jet is able to move on, and he gets his closure. In fact, he gets so much closure that it's like, I think there was a stopwatch he had that stopped working and it started moving again. Yeah. That was great symbolism. That was wonderful. That's why I think this is more of an animated movie than a TV show. But anyways, so Spike, I believe it was the creator. When some fans, Matt, can I spoil the ending? Is that cool?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
This anime is over 20 years old.
So a lot of people were upset about the ending because the canonical ending is, and I say canonical because there is a movie, but it takes place between. We're gonna have to watch that at some point and cover it, but it takes place between 2 episodes. But basically, at the end of the show, as we know, Spike dies. It's not even like a cliffhanger. It's people have asked the creator, like, does he live? Does he live? Do we get a sequel? And he said it should have been obvious to you guys that he's dying. He's dead.
No, that's not what he said. He basically
said, I'm paraquoting it.
No. He actually said something completely different. He said maybe he's dead, maybe he's not.
He pretty much let the ending in an open end. Like
it's not. That. It's definitely not open ended though.
Yeah.
I mean, Spike collapses on the ground in front of all of his enemies that want to kill him, and then it does the sad music and pans away and pans to the sky. And earlier in that 2-parter episode, the Native American dude says that says to Jet that
was it Jet or his son? I can't remember.
It was the son you're thinking of, Jupiter Jazz. He says to Jet that everyone has a star, and when they die, the star peters out. And also dies. And like after the camera pans up from Spike's body, and right at the end of the end credit song for that episode, you see a star flicker and peter out. All right. Now, I guess that could have been Vicious's star, but it was come on, it was Jet's or Spike's.
And then on top of that, like, the music ends, it then goes to a grayscale drawing of Spike smiling with his eyes closed where he died. Like that is,
and it says you're gonna carry that weight, which is the name of a Beatles song, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's very, they try to make it as obvious as possible. Is he dead? Yes, he's dead. Like that is trying, they're trying to, and then whenever like an animator says it's like, is he? It's basically to just be like, all right, go have fun with your fanfic. I don't care. Like that's really what it is.
I just wanted to mention, well, I know he says that, but there was a different interview where I could have sworn either someone mistranslated it or something, but I can swear I remember specifically a translation being, he basically, I'm paraquoting, he was puzzled about it. He said, why are people still on about this? Like, it should have been obvious that he died. Like he says that more or less, and then he says, these characters were stuck in time. They were stuck in their pasts. See, that it goes back to what I was saying, but I was saying the person who was most stuck was Spike, because he refused to give up. I mean, if you remember the shootout scene with the church, was it the first few episodes where it's shown, right? Like
it was episode 5, Ballad of the Fallen Angels.
And that's what leads to Jupiter Jazz, right?
No,
I'm saying after that, the next time we come across his passes, then, right?
Yeah. Let's we should talk about Vicious for a little bit.
We should. I'll just finish up what I was saying. So it's just clear through his memory flashbacks and that theme song, like which one I'm talking about, the kind of depressing, cheery sounding one.
Blue.
Yeah. Like he is refusing to let go. I mean, like Faye and Spike try to convince him to just let go, and he refuses. Towards the end, they're all saying, "This is really stupid, dude. Just let it go." And he's saying, no, this is my thing. I have to do it." And as we know, he gets killed because of it. But go ahead.
Yeah. Let's talk about Vicious for a little bit. Now, Vicious was a member of the Syndicate, and worked very closely with Spike, and they
grew up
basically together. They grew up together. They considered each other family. But then a woman got in the way. Her name, of course, was Julia, and the bickering over this woman turned escalated until Vicious and his
Julia and Spike try to run away, and then Vicious try to kill them. Yeah.
Yes. And this is sort of why Spike left the Syndicate, because he managed to fake his death using what appears to be planted explosives. You see in a sort of montage sequence right before the opening credits of the first episode, you see him like flip open a detonator, and that is actually how some detonators look, especially in old in much older military explosives. And he smiles, and that's because, and of course you see there in another montage, you see flashes of him firing a machine gun out of a bouquet of roses, which he planned to hand to Julia, but there was, of course, a machine gun in it in case if it was a trap. It turned out to be a trap.
Can we
But
talk for a second about that Falcon, that bird?
Hold on. Let's talk about Vicious first. So Vicious, the guy himself, I don't find to be particularly interesting. He seems to mostly just be some sort of ruthless, sadistic killer and kind of a sociopath.
That's pretty much what that guy is. Actually, he went
He
to the
does.
point that he killed the mob boss in one
He
of the
doesn't.
episodes.
He doesn't have a particularly interesting ideology that makes a villain particularly memorable, and there's not really much to sympathize with him. He's just a bad dude for the most part.
This is one of my biggest issues to the anime, is just how bland Vicious was. He's supposed to feel like that final boss. He's supposed to feel like it's like this is the person that even said it's like like I can't remember the exact line, but it was like something along the lines of like I'm the one that can determine your fate. Spike, I'm the only person that can kill you.
Was the guy who was supposed to run the syndicate, but then the guy decides, I'm gonna take over the entire, not just the syndicate, but I'm also gonna tear down everyone who is against me.
Well, whenever he like was fighting Spike, he said it's like I'm the only person that can determine your fate or something. It was something along those lines, and he didn't like in their first fight. Whenever he threw Spike out of the window, like it showed that they were an even match, but it just like there was nothing to cheer against. It was just like, oh, this guy's bad. I want him dead. Like that's it, and it's just there wasn't that satisfying, like, oh, this guy died. There was no build up to it. The anime was almost too episodic to the point that we didn't get much out of the villain to know why we wanted him to die. We just got like, this is the person that fucked up Spike's life. And
that was
like,
being edgy for the sake of being edgy. I mean, have you seen the guy's design?
Yeah.
Have you seen the bird that the guy?
I want to hop in, okay, because you guys have been talking about this. I have an alternate view of this. It's not so much, oh yeah, these two brothers, a girl got in between them. No, it was betrayal is a big deal in many cultures, especially if you're betraying your friend. I don't think Spike betrayed Vicious. It's very clear that Vicious is, at the very least, a sociopath. During the wars, I think the wars for Jupiter. I can't remember. He found it. He found
Titan.
Titan. Okay, one of the moons. It was right. Yeah. So during the wars on Titan, he found a stranger, a random stranger, to use as a fall guy for possibly espionage that he himself did. And he has no qualms with ruining people's lives. He's kind of like a cutthroat, cold-blooded reptile. And mammals are warm-blooded. You know, even in small children, if a child sees another child crying, that child will also start crying to alert an adult. This is not, Lewis, let me finish. This is not someone who cares about other people being hurt. So when Spike is injured, I guess that's the first time he came across her and like started falling in love with her. She's got, I think, his head on her lap or something, or she's just basically sitting next to his head and taking care of him. I think the reason they fell in love is because they both knew Vicious, and neither of them had a nature that was similar to his, because they both were caring, emotional human beings, whereas Vicious was just more concerned about climbing up the chain, you know, like the food chain. In fact, he was so ambitious, he gets himself in trouble towards the end. The Syndicate itself decides to try and kill him, and also, unfortunately, try to kill Spike because they thought, you know, anybody tied to Vicious might be a threat down the road. That's why the Bebop crew had to deal with them. But my point is, Vicious is like, it's like if Sephiroth from Final Fantasy was never a good guy, because Sephiroth was a good guy before he went bad. It's like if he's one of those characters, except he was never good to begin with. Vicious was screwed in the head to begin with.
See, but yeah, like I know the backstory of Sephiroth. Like I know his past. I know exactly what happened to him. With Vicious, it's just like, oh, he's bad.
Oh, the indication is he grew up a punk on the street with Spike.
Yeah, and I kind of get that, but like, there's no like, I want this guy dead. He went from like this to this, or like he was always bad. Like even in like different animes that we did watch, where like we had a villain that was always villainous, that never had a good side to it. There's been a build up. There's been this guy keeps doing these horrible things. We know about their past. We know why they're doing it. It's just like, okay, yeah, he started a coup. Oh yeah, it was so character driven that we missed an entire character. You know, like that's really it. And that's why, like, to me, it just felt kind of boring on the way there. For the last few episodes, where it's like, I feel horrible that Spike died, and I don't like that he died. But why did he die? I don't even care about this other dude. Like, what was the point of it? Like, it's like, yeah, he's avenging his like woman that he loved, but she's dead. There was no reason to go after him. There was no reason for him to just not run away at that point, you know, other than revenge. And they didn't even talk about the revenge of it.
Yeah, I'd like to before we go into ratings, I'd like to go around the circle 2 additional times. One, to say to just talk about your favorite scene, and another to talk about your favorite episode and least favorite episode. We'll go favorite and least favorite. So first, the favorite scene. Why don't you start, Josh?
Oh man, you know what? Skip me for a second. Give me a minute to figure this one out.
Okay, okay. I'll start.
I'll
I'll
read
start
through.
then. There's a scene in the last episode that I find to be particularly powerful, and it gets me every time. And you know, Jet's laying on the couch. His ship is wrecked. He's got a bullet wound in the leg. He's and he thinks his friend Spike is dead. And then Spike just kind of shows up, and Jet's shocked, and Spike just you know, there's kind of a framing like he Spike almost looks like some sort of apparition with the way the camera is sort of looking at him, and you can kind of feel Jet's shock in that shot. And anyway, Spike asks, "How, you know, do we have anything to eat here?" And so he makes him the quote unquote bell peppers and beef that don't have any beef. And there's some idle banter about the quality of the food, and but that it's kind of irrelevant to the scene. What really gets me about it is, you know, ordinarily, you know, I've lived with roommates before. Uh, you know, ordinarily, you know, you're arguing with them all the time. You're sharing and cracking jokes. Spike is just smoking a cigarette and watching, or no, Jet is just smoking a cigarette and watching Spike eat very intently. And you know, why would you be watching your roommate, your friend eat? You know, it's kind of a weird thing to do when you think about it. But then you think about the fact that Spike Jet thought Spike was dead. So what he's really doing when he's watching Spike eat is he's just cherishing this moment that he gets to have with his friend that he thought he was dead. He's cherishing this moment after he's taken so many moments with him for granted. And it's just some just ordinary idle kind of thing, but he thinks it's one of the but to him it's one of the most special things ever. And then of course there's the story about the cat and all of that. And actually I do kind of want to mention it because they the story about that Spike tells about the cat is like very indicative that okay, Spike's going to die. And he tells a joke at the end of it, and they both laugh. But you, it's not funny, and you can tell that they're not happy when they're laughing. They're actually quite sad. And I don't know, that scene just gets me every time.
Yeah, I really like that. Like that whenever he just tries to like cut the mood with the joke, saying it's like I always hated cats. It's great. Um, but it like those are very deep moments that like really drove the show, I think. So while you were talking about like the deep moment, like I had like a moment that I enjoyed more, and then like a moment that like was more meaningful to me. And then this way I can kind of avoid like picking two of my favorite episodes. I can focus on the one that I like the most. Outpost. So like the moment that I thought was probably like one of the coolest ones was from Scratch, whenever you had Faye on the ground and you had Spike running in and trying to shut down the like all the screens and stuff, and he was like, "You're the one that's not living in reality," and he's like shooting all the screens and like they overcome it. Um, like just that entire thing where it was this person that's living in the computer and like people are like trying to download their thoughts onto the basically onto the internet, and then try and live forever through that means, and like running a cult and just like shutting that down, being like, this isn't real. Like that was a very powerful moment of like Spike realizing like what is real, you know? Like he can at least tell that much, even though like he feels like he's living a fever dream half the time. Knowing the difference between like what is real and what isn't is kind of like a huge theme in the show, and that kind of brought a couple moments together, and that was one of like the better episodes in my eyes. The moment that meant most to me was actually in episode 10 though, with Jet, where he was sitting down and he was talking to his ex. Um, just having that conversation about like why she left, like what was going through her head, and then him just accepting that. If you've ever talked to an ex years later and then just had those conversations, that was one of the most real moments in the entire show that actually got to me. So, um, being that I've been in the same situation before, it was very vivid and kind of the same atmosphere. So,
Striker.
It's actually difficult to just pick one when it comes to favorite scenes, because there have been some things I remember. I mean, keep in mind, I used to watch the show back when it was on Adult Swim, but one of my personal favorite scenes was the in Mushroom Samba, when when the character when Aang eats the freaking mushrooms and starts tripping out, and then at the part when the train stops, Aang just tells the cow that Aang basically thinks the cow because of how he stopped the train, because it was also real. Like hearing these two animals have their own dialogue, but one of the scenes that made the a very lasting impression on me was easily Pierre Defoe's death, because holy fucking shit, we're talking about a guy who was subjected to experiments, and not to mention the fact that he was driven insane by those same doctors. Then he starts freaking the fuck out when he sees a cat. What happens is, this episode actually has a meaning. The fact that mental illness is is no joke, especially when it comes to someone who like Pierre, who is basically full blown schizophrenic. Like the guy's intelligence is the balls to the point where he's a child now. He's like a childlike being who knows no wrong from no wrong to right. Like basically, the guy is the ultimate killing machine until he gets crushed by the floats, which is quite ironic considering how his mental state was. That was the most dangerous thing about that character, the fact that you can never predict what he was going to do. And like I said, there's a lot of scenes that I remember from Cowboy Bebop that are actually pretty that I actually liked, especially on Heavy Metal Queen, when Spike finally gets
No,
his
hold on. We were picking. We're
one.
trying to pick one.
All right. I'll just end by saying that it is difficult for me to pick just one. So I'm afraid that
Pick your favorite. Pick the one that you relate to the most. That's what I did. I really, really liked Vaults for Venus. I like about.
Well, we're talking about a scene.
No, I know. I'm telling him like because that one in particular, it was very touching, and the emotional segments were well done. But my point is, Lewis, pick one that you feel you can really relate to, or that you really enjoyed watching.
well, honestly, I could say I relate to Pierre Lafleur, not because of the mental issues part, because of the fact that the guy was simply. It's actually very difficult to sympathize with the villain. It really is. But considering that the guy, I feel sorry for the guy more than anything else.
Mm.
Regarding favorite episode,
We're not doing that yet.
all right.
Yeah, we'll loop back around and get there.
All right.
RJ, go ahead.
Yeah.
I say
RJ.
my favorite and least favorite.
No,
No,
just
we're
doing
doing
scene.
your favorite scene.
Well, so not no least favorite scene. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, my least favorite's pretty short. It's extremely short, but my favorite scene is when they get Ein and they don't realize how intelligent he is. Heck, there's this. I mean, there's other scenes where like they're doing brainwave scans and they put one on Ein. It's like they still don't get that. I mean, Ed gets that Ein is intelligent, but the crew doesn't. They think he's just a mutt. So I'd say my favorite scene is when they got him, and it's very obvious to the audience that this dog is intelligent, and they just think he's just a mutt. Like, they yell at him, "Hey, get out of there! Hey, don't do that!" Like, so yeah, least favorite. It's like a split-second scene when Ed eats the friggin' monster. The rock lobster, the lobster who's turned into a gelatinous sentient blob. That was disgusting.
That was pretty funny. They were having so much trouble with that thing the whole episode, and then Ed just eats it in her sleep.
She like, pudding. She goes pudding. She just eats the friggin' lobster.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's start with the favorite and least favorite episodes. Do you want me to start again, or can you start?
Yeah, start again, and then.
All right. My favorite episode, I'd say, is probably Boogie Woogie Feng Shui. I really like Boogie Woogie Feng Shui. It has all the makings of a good Cowboy Bebop episode. It has an interesting setting, a great premise with the feng shui, and the ability to like predict the future with it. It does this sort of self narration film noir thing with Jet, and he's going through this story even though he kind of he knows he could just like he could just run off and do something else, and there's some good humor in it, and there's some good action in it, and then there's a space battle. It's just a great episode. And then my least favorite episode is probably Pierre LaFaux. Or the one I like. I don't. I think that episode has a lot of problems. The first of all, the animation. There is a lot of really horrible early digipaint in that episode. most of that episode or good chunks of that episode are not on animation cells, and early digipaint looks terrible. And this isn't like the worst early digipaint, but it doesn't look great. The action choreography is terrible. There's a part where the villain just juggles Jet in midair like 3 times. It looks so unnatural and goofy. The only the only part of that episode that I thought was particularly good was when Ed brings the computer up to Faye with a message that's meant for Spike, and Spike and she says, "Don't show this to Spike or else," and then Spike goes, he'll jump right in, and then Spike kind of goads her into admitting her feelings for him, but instead of actually admitting to it, she just calls him a lunkhead. So that was a pretty good scene, but overall the episode's kind of weak.
All right. So, I would agree that Pierre LaFaux was definitely the weakest episode. So I'm just going to say I
yeah,
agree
for
with.
sure.
I think that.
I felt personally a tad though. I kid.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
that's one of my least favorites as well.
Yeah.
Because you go ahead.
Yeah.
Yep,
So like I would say that. I also didn't like. Fuck. I just had it up. Um. Oh, Cowboy Funk. I didn't like Cowboy Andy as an entire character, and I thought that a lot of that episode was very tacky. And while we got the very famous "See you later, cow" or "See you, cowboy" kind of thing, it was such a tacky episode, and I hated the character, and I hated almost everything about it. Um, so I'll say that was my least favorite, but I'd also say Pierre LaFaux was probably one of the weaker episodes, more so whenever I was saying that the first half is a lot weaker and the entire animated. So to have one of the worst episodes near the end is just kind of ridiculous, being that I could have picked a bunch of the earlier ones too. Um, I'd say my favorite though, had to be Speak Like a Child. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, it was a very Faye heavy episode. It was her betting on the horse races, which was very Faye-esque, where it's like she's winning and winning and winning, and she's like making all this money, and then at the end of the episode, she just bet everything, and she's like, "Well, I guess that's what happens whenever you bet on horses." It's like you literally had like enough money, like you didn't think this through at all. Like it just showed like how she was with money. Um, and then you have them like looking for the Betamax tapes. You have them like getting this tape that they have no idea what to do with. So then you get that like vintage kind of person like watching like old films and stuff and being like, "Oh, like this was the peak. This was the peak of acting. This was the peak of everything." And just this
20th
giant
century
nerd.
dramas and shit.
Yeah, and just it
I
was
think I was really.
yeah, it was just like having that moment was great, and then them breaking his beta max player, and then them going into some building and like pulling out, and they're like, it's like, oh well, that wasn't a beta max, that was a VHS, and just like having them struggle through that. So there was like a bunch of great moments, even just like them going down into the building and sliding down the rails and trudging through the water. Like all of those moments were just it was a good balance of comedy with storytelling that I thought was very great. And then you get that final conclusion of finding a little bit more out about Faye, and it very much pushed Faye's character ahead while not being like super about her, and we got more of like the funny parts from like Spike, and there were moments with Ed throughout the episode, and Ein. So it was kind of like what you want as an episode for this entire anime. You got a little
I'm
bit of
just thinking
everything.
about the part where Faye Faye like calls the ship and Ein answers.
Oh yeah, just
Wow.
and then just Ed walks over and it's like, oh hi, and it's like, what's happened? Well,
See, I was just gonna say that right there.
yeah,
See, like Ein is intelligent, and
Yeah.
Spike and Jet don't get it. Ed gets it. but no one else
yeah.
does.
Well, and then Ed was like, it's like they're pretty broken up, and she's like, oh, they miss me, and it's like them like crying over the fact that they just spent like hours trying to get to this one fucking thing. Yeah, so
All right, RJ, you pick your favorite and least favorite.
Okay, I'm gonna start with my least favorite, then I'll do my favorite. Okay, Poirot Lafaux, Pierre Lafaux, or Mad Poirot. That episode and that character, it could have been a lot better. This could have been. I mean, they could have done this as a two-parter, because as you might know, basically when, because Jet's a former cop, he does an inquiry with Bob and says, hey, my buddy Spike got attacked by this guy. Here's the description. And he says, oh, that guy. Yeah, we know about him. Please don't tell anybody about this. We're trying to keep it on the down low, but he's targeting high level, like ISSP. I guess that's just like he's targeting scientists basically, or directors or whatever. Well, we're shown through like little brief flashbacks why he's afraid of cats, because there's a cat at that facility that reminds him of the torturous experiments he was put through. And he, other than that, we don't really know much. It's just he was a person who was experimented on. He's gone insane, and he's trying to kill Spike and anyone else who sees his face, because he's paranoid about people knowing or knowing about him. So I just didn't like that episode. I mean, I like the visuals, like it's really cool. Like it's almost supernatural, but then you find out the reason he has all this strength and stuff is because like he was experimented on. He's a superhuman, but he's also mentally unwell. Like he's like an unstable kindergartner. That's how his brain's broken.
In the flashback sequence in that episode, I forgot to mention that they cover "On the Run" by Pink Floyd.
What? Are you serious? I didn't even notice that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
So like how do I put this? The visuals are great. The environment, I love the environments. It reminded me of Batman almost, like the gothic like kind of neo-noir look going for the cities they're in. But
RJ,
wait, Lewis, let me finish. So I like the visuals for the environments, but other than that, it was just villain was two-dimensional, story was two-dimensional, and the police refusing to help and not getting involved because they're trying to keep it on the down low made no sense. So it was an okay episode. In fact, I couldn't find any other episode that I could dislike because they were entertaining. His episode was just weird. Like it didn't feel like a Cowboy Bebop episode, if that makes sense to you guys. I mean, it did and it didn't. And I'd say that's my least favorite episode. I still like the episode. It's my least favorite if I had to pick one.
RJ, you know what's interesting about the design for Pierre Lafaux? The fact that he was inspired by Joker and Penguin from Batman the Animated Series, which some write.
He's inspired by them?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, the character was inspired by 3 Batman villains: Tallyman, Joker, and then the Penguin. And
we're almost at 2 hours.
Yeah. All right, Lewis, that's really cool. I didn't know that. My favorite episode, I've mentioned it. It's just Vaults for Venus, namely because that episode felt like a cop drama episode, or like it felt like, you know, I mentioned very early on in today's podcast that growing up I watched like Italian like detective movies and stuff, or just European or old European and Asian detective movies. It felt like that. It felt like that. The main character is looking for something else. It falls into his lap, and he realizes it's a lot more complicated than he first thought. He ends up helping a suspect. Like, that was great. I love the writing for that episode, and it was also really sad. Like, you actually feel bad about Rocco. Yeah, that's it. I just really love the writing and presentation for Dance or Vaults for Venus. So, anyways, yeah. Oh, also, I really like how Venus is distinctively different from the other planets. You can see like floating plants in the skies. It's super cool. All right,
Strike.
all.
Nope. Lewis
No,
hasn't
for me,
done
for me.
his.
Yeah, that was all for me.
Okay. Lewis, you go.
All right. All right. Let me start. Favorite episode? After a lot of consideration, I will honestly say that sorry for the delay. I will say that Marshall Samba happens to be my all-time favorite episode, or because of the fact of because of how trippy the episode is. The fact that a lot of shit happens to the characters when they eat the mushrooms. It's actually the most comical episode in the series as well. My least favorite episode, you know, it's hard to defend Pierre LaFaux, but I'm gonna have to go with you guys on this one. I never mind about, you know what, it had potential to be a very interesting episode, but it just falls flat on its face, and it gets crushed on like Pierre LaFaux did in the ending of the episode by the floats. So
I mean, I agree with you 100%. That's why I said it should have been a two-parter. That episode should have been fleshed out more.
it should have been a bit darker though, like really dark.
Pretty dark to begin with. It's a man who's now mentally handicapped because of all the evil experimentation on him. It's pretty dark. I mean, the way he dies is pretty dark too. He was already in a childlike state. He becomes like even worse when he gets injured. That episode was dark, sad, depressing, and just downright just morbid.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'm just saying it should have been a two-parter because I wanted to know more about that character. But go ahead.
Yeah, the fact he freaks out. The last thing he says is, "I want my mommy," before he gets crushed. Like he starts bawling his balls out. Like, yeah, it is pretty effing dark, but it also ends like that, like nothing ever happened. But yeah, Mushroom Samba.
I think it's probably the weakest episode in the series, but it
Yeah.
still carries its weight on some level.
Okay.
Anyway, go ahead.
Let's get
Let's go to conclusions
All right. So I guess
and ratings.
I usually start this off. So while I can, I think it's pretty easy to tell that I enjoyed parts of this, but I didn't enjoy all of it. This isn't the normal type of anime that I would watch, and I recognize the many gifts that it has. Like from a visual level, it's on a completely different level for its time. On a audio level and a voice acting level, this is definitely one of the greatest animes that ever came out. It was just extremely well done. I have a lot of issues with the writing. I have a lot of issues with some of the plots. There was a few plot holes, just a few basic issues, but it just didn't draw me in the way that it should have. While I can still recognize it. Part of the other thing that I want to really emphasize on this is I don't think that it's bad for its time. I think that if I would have watched this 20 years ago, whenever I was a kid, I think I would have enjoyed it to its fullest. And not having the nostalgia goggles is also kind of being a bias in its own way. And knowing how many animes I have watched that have drawn inspiration from it, I cannot give it a low rating because of how important this is and how amazing and well done it is. But I also can't say that I fully enjoyed it knowing that animes that have taken inspiration and done things better and have drawn from it and created something that I've enjoyed more, that I can't give it a higher rating even though I want to. So I want to emphasize all of that up front. Um, I have to give it an 8. I was thinking about other animes that I've given lower, and there is no way that it is a 7.5 or lower than that. But it is also something that I can't give a 9 or a 10 to, even though I can tell that other people would because of how important and amazing and influential it is. So I'm giving it an 8, being that I couldn't enjoy it to its fullest, but I can recognize other people have, and I can't give it anything lower because there's been way worse animes that I've given lower.
All right, Striker.
Well, to Josh, I defer regarding Cowboy Bebop. This is an anime that, like you guys said, even people who aren't into anime can actually get into the show. This is one of the very few animes out there that has aged like wine. Like, let me say it like this: this show has a status so incredible that I'm actually surprised that Japan has not, the Japanese government has not named this anime a cultural icon, because that's what this show is.
May I ask you a question? Is Dragon
Oh,
Quest considered a cultural icon? Because this should definitely be considered a cultural icon. It's
Like,
recognized across.
hold on. Let him continue, please.
All right, go ahead.
RJ,
You go, you go.
RJ, on that one, I say, all right. I will say this is one of the most one of the cultural icons when it comes to Japanese culture as a whole. This anime, yes, this anime may have taken a lot of inspiration from the West, but it's one of those shows that you can just pick up, watch an episode, enjoy it all over again like it was the first time. It's also, the music is absolute gold, like it's pure kino. This is the jazz music, the samba, the rock music, just about everything about this anime. There will never be, there hasn't been anything like this anime since it came out in 1998. This is considering how popular it really is. The other problem is this anime will absolutely ruin anime for you, because just about anything else that you watch will not be in the same level as Cowboy Bebop. It's if this anime was ever uh something that you would watch uh as a mandatory watch, you have to watch this anime. If you're an otaku, if you're a guy who likes anime, you have to watch this anime because it really is unlike anything else that has ever come out after it ever since. Cowboy Bebop. Um, uh, I'll be honest here. One of the very big comparisons is that it always gets compared to Space Dandy always gets compared to Cowboy Bebop because it's done by the same guy. It has more or less the same elements. Only Space Dandy does it in a comical fashion instead of Cowboy Bebop being going the serious route. This is gonna be the highest score I have ever given to an anime ever since I laid my eyes on the first episode I've ever watched, which was Heavy Metal Queen. 9.8 out of 10. Go watch it. this is one of Japan's cultural treasures. This is an entertainment icon in a way. This show is unlike anything else on Earth.
All right. RJ.
So, to answer my own question, yes. So apparently, the gaming industry of Japan considered Dragon Quest to be Japan's national game. Now, if only the anime industry of Japan would consider Cowboy Bebop to be an industry treasure, similar to how the gaming industry in Japan considers Dragon Quest to be their treasure. So, I might be biased. Little biased, teeny tiny bit biased, so as a result, I have to be fair with scoring. Growing up, I loved detective movies. Like, my favorite superhero in the Western comics, Batman. I just love detective stuff. I don't know. It's cool. It's like there's a mystery going on. There's suspense. Is he going to make it? Is he going to survive? Blah, blah, blah. This show had a lot of that, and I loved it for that. It also has a very peculiar cultural sensitivity because one of the reasons that I'm just going to quickly mention this as part of like why I'm scoring it high. It's mentioned that Spike is stuck in time, not just because he's not letting the past go, but because he joined the syndicate, he might as well be dead. That is a cultural thing in the East, where if you get involved with a bad crowd, you're more or less treated like you're already dead, because there's no way you're leaving that crowd. You can't leave the syndicate. If you do, they'll try to kill you. Or if they don't kill you, they will come back to you to ask you for favors. And if you refuse, they'll kill you. So you might as well be dead. Spike and Vicious joining the syndicate sealed their fate. And at the end, they're both dead. So I that's just one example. But the writer of this franchise, because it's a franchise, there's a manga, and there's even like 2 video games that some people consider quote unquote lost episodes. But they did a really great job writing this. The attention to detail, the music, the pace of the story, heck, the real life cultural connotations, like I just mentioned, like Spike was dead to begin with. He was living on borrowed time. That combined, it whenever I bring up that I like anime and the average person who is who just pays attention to stereotypes instead of actually looking at stuff themselves, I cite this anime as the best example of why not every single anime is characters loudly screaming or acting like toddlers. This is an animated film. I would argue that this series is an animated film, or like an animated detective series, because it's lifelike. The animation's lifelike. The story, the characters are very organic. What I was going to say is, Neo Tokyo, Will, he mentioned way earlier, that he liked the look of the show, how it's, there's beat up ships. It looks like a real ship. It doesn't look sterile. I love that. For the same reason I like, I guess at some point we'll cover it, Gundam 0083 Stardust Memory. That Gundam show had a similar aesthetic, where the metal you would see on the ships was beat up in some places. Cowboy Bebop just pulled it off perfectly. I can see that world being real, especially with everybody from different cultures going to different planets, and each planet is distinctive of that culture. But that's a thing. Like, not very many sci-fis, especially in anime, can pull that off. They're either sterile or depressingly, nihilistic or apocalyptic. Or if it's not sterile, everything is being destroyed or is dilapidating. So this show had the perfect balance, and that's why I want to give it. I'm going to give it a 9.0, because if I give it a 10 or anything above a 9, it'll be biased, and I'm trying my best to avoid being a biased person when it comes to rating things. So I give it a 9. Great music, amazing writing, and the beyond amazing presentation. But yeah, 9.
So I would consider something that is a classic, and not only is a classic, but defines its genre, and indeed defines its medium, and indeed even transcends its medium, I would consider by any qualifier for said work to be a masterpiece. By any measurable qualification, that would indeed be a masterpiece. And just as Citizen Kane transcends and defines film, or perhaps we can think of a few. Maybe it might be a little too arrogant to start mentioning the Mona Lisa or the Sistine Chapel, and trying to compare it to modern pop culture art. Perhaps that's a little arrogant. But I would say that Cowboy Bebop not only defines its medium, that is anime, but also transcends it to be a great work in the context of TV and film in general, and not just a great work in the medium of anime. And that being said, a masterpiece is not something without flaws. You know, that's impossible. But are the flaws even really that bad? Well, I certainly I don't think they are. I don't think they really damage the show in a particularly significant way. I think I think they damage the show if you're like really breaking it down to its you know, most detailed levels. But with this show, the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. You know, Jet, Spike, or Faye in any other context wouldn't be quite as interesting. And indeed the rest of the show and what you're getting as a complete package make up for the flaws. And so I would consider Cowboy Bebop to be a masterpiece. And that's something that I don't say lightly. I don't remember what I rated Evangelion. It was probably 9 point something. I consider Cowboy Bebop to be significantly better than Evangelion. So I'm going to give it a 10.
This is officially the highest rated anime we've ever done.
Yeah. So
ever.
Our rating comes out to 9.2. Me kind of dragging that down. But
It's a lot, jackass.
yeah, the MAL listing, the My Anime list, has it at an 8.79. The IMBD has it at an 8.9. And Google users have it at a 95%. So
pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, like
8.7 is ridiculously high for a MAU score.
Yeah, I mean, you're not gonna get much higher. And like I was like, even if I go on here,
Yeah.
like the
MAU scores always trend towards average.
it is I think it's in like the top 25. Yeah, top 30. It's 28th. Which has its own issues with some of the upper ones. But it as like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is number one, which kind of also deserves to be up there.
I finished that whole franchise, that Full Metal Alchemist. We got to do that at some point. It's a great.
So I mean, and there's some issue, but I would definitely consider this to be higher than many of the shows on this list. But yeah, there you go. That is our official score, and I think that pretty much sums it up. That this is a must-watch.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Just,
all right.
What do you say?
Just get it.
Yep. So, I guess that's the end, and I guess we will see you all next month whenever we figure out how we're watching.
Yep. Have a good night. Have a good month.
See you